society looks at women or men, both people that are overweight or obese, and they connect it to their self-worth and value. And that reflects back on people. And then now they have these GLP-1s that are going to help them. And then they're being insulted for taking the GLP-1s.
I mean,
So can you there's so many factors there that are involved. Can you address who would qualify for a GLP-1, what the
yeah,
BMI is? There's so
yeah.
much involved with that. And then other issues that also make people qualify for GLP-1s.
You're so right about that. It's like such a double-edged sword. No,
Mhm.
you're not doing well enough. Oh, now you're taking the easy way out, right? And I
Yes,
see that a lot
yes.
on social.
Welcome back to Hot Flashes and Cool Topics. Today we are talking to Dr. Alexandra Sowa. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thanks for joining us. I think this conversation is really needed because your book, The Ozempic Revolution, breaks down and answers a lot of the questions that women have. We are being inundated. Every other commercial is take a GLP-1, semaglutide, Ozempic. We'll go. Women don't know what they are, who to trust, should they go on them? There's so many questions. So I thought we could start with the basics.
Okay.
What exactly is a GLP-1 and how did it go from being something for diabetic patients to something for weight loss?
Yeah. Okay. So this is a big topic. I'll try to make it as easy to understand as possible.
Thank
So,
you.
yeah, GLP-1, glucagon-like peptide. And that is a naturally occurring hormone that happens in the body. We have native GLP-1. It's secreted in our gut. In the book, I go through the biology of weight gain and metabolic health, and I talk about the key hormonal players, and GLP-1 is one of them. Now, what happens over time is that our body doesn't respond to the native hormones. And as we put on more and more weight, when people say, I'm doing everything I can, and the weight just keeps coming on, it's because our hormones become dysregulated, and GLP-1 plays into that. And we found through science and investigation a hormone that we could give ourselves that is a copy of native GLP-1, but is thousands of times more effective than what our body makes and lasts in the terms of weeks rather than seconds, and our body really responds to it. So that is what semaglutide or Ozempic or Wegovy is. It's an artificial analog, a copy of what we naturally make in our body. So GLP-1s, why they have gotten so much attention is because they're incredibly powerful. We have GLP-1 receptors all over our body. It's not just something that affects weight. We actually have GLP-1 receptors in our brain, in our heart, in our kidneys. And this is one of the reasons that we see added benefits beyond what are the two known benefits, which are management of type 2 diabetes and weight management, because we have these receptors everywhere. But the three superpowers, as I call them, are they affect our brain, our stomach, and our GI tract, and at the level of our pancreas, they make our blood sugar more controlled. And these three things together make it so that we have very big and revolutionary outcomes in terms of this drug's ability to control both blood sugar and also in terms of weight loss.
And your book also addresses the fact that in the past, you go to your doctor, so many people have had such a negative experience with their weight, and they truly have tried things.
Yes.
Can you talk about how this plays such an important factor and how you address it in the book, that that people that are considered obese or larger, they really have tried. They're not cheating. So can you address that?
I think, unfortunately, in traditional medicine, we have not been encouraged to trust our patients. And I talk in the book, I open and close the book with a story of my grandmothers. My grandmothers both struggled with their weight, and their whole lives they tried to lose weight. And I was constantly surrounded by talk of the new diet, recommitting to Weight Watchers, going to the gym, having a Fitbit on. What else could they do? And it was always a constantly losing battle. But I knew that they were trying, and I knew that they were very, very bright and gifted women, and it wasn't a willpower thing. And so from a young age, I realized this was biology, and in my case, genetics. And I was handed these genetics and I had to figure out, okay, what is going to lead me down the healthiest path? I could already see before I even found this specialty that it was not going to be constant dieting. Like that could not be it because it wasn't working. And I know so many women who are listening to this are like, yeah, that was me. And my doctor just said, eat less, exercise more, or good luck. And it's biology. I mean, a lot of why we carry weight is both genetics, but what's happened since about 1980 is that the whole country has become heavier and heavier and heavier. And it has to do with the epigenetic changes that we're experiencing on a population level because of the way that our food is now made and the toxins in the air and the chemicals that we just consume by a product of our fast world. And there are so many factors that are going into why it is hard to lose weight beyond what we are or are not doing. And it's just, I start the book off by saying why your doctor has failed you, right? That's chapter 1. And I apologize to everyone who's ever heard from their doctor. There's no way you could be eating that little. Oh, I don't believe that you're going to SoulCycle 5 times a week. How could that be? Or trying this or trying that. You have to try harder. We just now know, science now is starting to realize that obesity is a disease, weight gain is multifactorial, and it's not just about what willpower, it's biology. So for anyone who's heard that before, please keep listening because we'll get into it and what you can do about it.
And you talk about that in the book, that it's neural hormonal dysregulation and genetics, that genetics play such a big part. And I think that, women have been, and men too, we just hear all the time, well, if you just eat less and exercise, but your genetics are your genetics.
Right. And your genetics set you up to be either more susceptible to what's around us or not. And so it doesn't all just come down to a gene level, because truthfully, before 1980, we had about 15% of the population who would meet criteria for obesity. And that was genetics. And that was probably my family's story, right? Just genetics. But then what's happened is some genes have kind of set us up to be more susceptible to this hormonal dysregulation that happens. So we talk about in the book, I lay out all of these hormones and why weight gain is so complicated. We talk about how GLP-1 becomes dysregulated, but so does insulin. You probably have heard the term insulin resistance. That's something that really rears its head in peri and menopause, and it becomes very hard for women to lose weight. We have something called leptin resistance, and it's our genetics that set us up to be more susceptible to these things. And then, so it's beyond just the obesity genetics. It becomes how well is your body built to live in the modern world where everything around us is fake?
Right. Yeah. And you also address what happens in society, how society is looking at so many things involved with this. Society looks at women or men, both people that are overweight or obese, and they connect it to their self-worth and value. And that reflects back on people. And then now they have these GLP-1s that are going to help them. And then they're being insulted for taking the GLP-1s. So can there's so many factors there that are involved. Can you address who would qualify for a GLP-1, what the BMI is? There's so much involved with that. And then other issues that also make people qualify for GLP-1s.
You're so right about that. It's like such a double-edged sword. No, you're not doing well enough. Oh, now you're taking the easy way out, right?
Yes,
and I see that a lot on social.
Yeah.
Okay, so then these medications have made it so that we actually, for the first time, have an effective treatment for this disease that helps people realize that, oh, if I actually can treat the hormone, then look at that. I have the ability to control what I'm eating. I am motivated to do the habits and go to the gym and do all of these things that I was doing before but weren't working, or they weren't working, so I got frustrated and I stopped. So these medications have actually been around since 2005, if you can believe it. But we were first using them for the management of type 2 diabetes. And through clinical trials, we realized that contrary to most type 2 diabetes treatment, which previously would actually lead to weight gain in people, these medications were not only really good at treating the blood sugar, but they were helping people lose weight. And since 2005, there have been new iterations of the drugs that have been released that have become closer and closer to that native GLP-1 that we make and more effective for that reason. Now, what makes these drugs so different than what we had said was like that native one that they make is that they last for a very long time. And so the newer versions of this drug are weekly injectables. And since this version has come out, first Ozempic and then Wegovy for weight management, and now we have a newer class of drugs even that combines GLP-1 with GIP hormones, and that's called tirzepatide. This is where we've started to hear a lot about these drugs because the weight loss potential jumped from like 8%, maybe 10%, now to 15, upwards of 20% total body weight loss. And so people were like, okay, now this is really something to talk about. So now it's becoming more and more part of medical management. And so that's great because we're kind of blowing open the doors of saying that we shouldn't be scared to manage the disease of obesity and get ahead of diseases. But with that is what you were talking about at the start, which is like, oh, now we're inundated by all these ads. Like, where do I get this med from? Is it right for me? And this is now we're kind of getting into a little bit of a murky territory. So I appreciate you asking me, like, what are the indications and who's right for it? Okay. So FDA says that on the weight management side, we use BMI criteria. And the BMI criteria is a BMI of 27 or greater, which truthfully, people think that people should be on these drugs when they're very, very overweight. But BMI of 27, you honestly wouldn't like pick that person out of a crowd at all. And with that, you should also have something called a comorbidity. So some other disease that would be positively affected by weight loss. So high blood pressure, high cholesterol, insulin resistance, joint pain, back pain, sleep apnea. Usually I can find one of those things because with weight gain comes these other issues. And that's why we care about weight. It's not just about being thin, it's about preventing other disease. Or you have a BMI greater than 30. What's really interesting is that these definitions are shifting. So while these kind of still sit with the FDA, some of these drugs are removing their BMI criteria and they're getting FDA approval for other diseases. So if you have known coronary artery disease or peripheral vascular disease, and you have some excess weight, okay, now you're going to get these covered. Maybe you don't even need to have as high of a weight, or sleep apnea treatment is getting approval. So we're kind of expanding who is appropriate for these. It's very fast evolving, kind of changing definition. And we are starting to look instead of BMI, because that's not like a really good marker of health. It just takes into account your height and your weight. We're looking at body fat composition, which to me is a much more important driver of metabolic health than the number on the scale. And it's really what women should be looking at, because sometimes people are so obsessed. We've been trained to think about being thin on the scale, but really you want to be strong on the scale. You want to be strong on the scale, and that's more important than thin. So if you have higher body fat percentages that kind of fall into the obesity criteria and you have some health issues, but your BMI is lower, then you might qualify for these drugs too.
And I think for a lot of women in our demographic, especially, we are more concerned with being strong, having muscle mass,
Yeah.
because as we get older, we want to protect our bones, and it's important to be strong and healthy. I like in your book that you talk about what it feels like to be on the drug, like what you can expect, side effects, and things like that. But before we get to that actual experience, a lot of people are concerned because, I knew someone who a year and a half ago was spending like $800 a month for the medication. I was like, are you insane? Because they weren't that heavy. They weren't, but it was the new thing.
Yeah.
How can people go about confirming that, number one, they're getting the right one for them, and two, that it can be covered by insurance?
It's a great question. First, on the cost, we need to be doing a better job in this country from a government level, through kind of how drugs are distributed, through pharmaceutical responsibility. We need to be bringing down the cost of these medications. In Europe, the same drugs that are $1,200 here are $200 a month there. So there's something wrong, right?
Insane.
To that point, some people see this actually as an investment in their health. And what my patients have found, if they even have to pay out of pocket, they are spending a heck of a lot less money eating out, Uber Eatsing, snacking, drinking. And so when they actually look at the balance, they're like, okay, this is something that I'm investing in because I see it as preventive. But most people aren't afforded that luxury. In the book, I lay out the exact script that my office uses on how to talk to your insurance company, because my goodness, is it complicated? And sometimes you'll get the wrong answer. But you really should be your own advocate with your insurance company, and you call and you ask, do I have coverage? If it's for weight management, it's not just GLP-1 coverage. Do I have coverage of Wegovy or Zepbound for the treatment of obesity? And if so, what are the qualifications and what is my out-of-network cost for this? Or, do I have to meet a deductible? Insurance is so tough. I have 4 kids and I'm constantly like, I get all the papers upon papers from insurance, and I'm like, what is going on here? Why is this so complicated? If I can't figure out what any of this means, I don't know how patients do it. But if you call your insurance, you can generally understand what the cost is. I will say with Medicare and Medicaid, it's becoming a very interesting time. So previously, in the early 90s, Medicare passed a bill that said we will never cover weight loss drugs. And this has been something that my obesity medicine society has been fighting against for years and years. Well, we got somewhere this year. Wegovy was the first weight loss drug to be approved by Medicare. And it's a little bit tricky. It's not just for obesity. It's for obesity with pre-existing coronary artery disease. And now it's being used for stroke prevention and MI and all-cause death from heart disease. We are also seeing sleep apnea being covered by Medicare and Medicaid. And currently, right now in Congress, is a proposed bill that was pushed through by Biden and has a really good shot of making its way where all anti-obesity medications would be covered by Medicare and Medicaid. This would be a huge turning point for us. So if this is something that sounds good to you, call your representatives and just voice your support that this is something that you would like, because these medications are such an amazing revolution and advancement in medicine. But if only a small fraction of people can afford them, what does that mean for us?
And, not to mention what it's going to do if you are able, well, all the things that obesity leads to.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, just the metabolic syndrome, right?
Metabolic syndrome, 16 types of cancers, heart disease, heart attacks, stroke, dementia. And we actually are seeing potential use of GLP-1s for dementia prevention and treatment, which
Wow.
is insane. People are kind of like jumping ahead with those studies saying, oh, everyone should be on it. But no, we're using it for actual treatment progression. And it really does appear to be very promising. So yes, it's kind of like, hey, if we could get we know that the root cause of the majority of chronic disease in this country is metabolic dysfunction. Just like you said, I love that you referenced metabolic syndrome, right? When our blood sugar is out of control, or even just slightly elevated, truthfully, not out of control, but just not normal. When our triglycerides are not normal, when our belly fat is higher than we want it to be, when our ratio between our hips and our waist is off, that sets us up for a lot of chronic disease. And so ideally, we get to avoid it entirely without treatment and medication, but that's not how it's appearing for us as a country and as a world right now. So if we have a treatment for it, the potential of decreased spending, of just better years of our life, which we all deserve, the potential is extraordinary.
So,
It's amazing. Oh, I'm sorry, Colleen. Go
oh,
ahead.
that's okay. So, can we talk about what it's like to be on one of these medications? Side effects, and
Hi.
we hear. I've heard several people who have gone on it talk about the food noise is
Yeah.
gone. So, can you talk a little bit about what you can expect when you go on it?
Yeah. So it's a little different from everybody. And I always tell people that your journey is unique. So if you don't feel a decreased food noise immediately, it's not that it's not working for you. It's just how you're responding. Or if the second you take it, you're like, I feel no appetite, that's just normal for you and it will get better. Like your appetite will come back. And I talk people through all of that in the book, The Ozempic Revolution. But the side effects component, I think, is the thing that's gotten the most amount of negative attention and unnecessarily so. So when we talked about how this drug works, it works at the level of your stomach and it decreases your stomach and GI tract emptying time. So food sits in your stomach longer, which actually in turn signals those hormones that have been a little bit dysfunctional to say, I'm full, I'm full, I'm full. Please don't tell me to eat again. And it works. And part of that process is decreasing this food noise where people are constantly thinking about their next meal and their snack and just constantly thinking about food, and it just quiets it. And that impact on the stomach where the stomach slows, well, so does your digestion get a little bit altered. So we have those things we hear about, constipation or some diarrhea or some nausea. Its impact on blood sugar can sometimes leave us feeling a little fatigued. But if you know that these side effects are coming, you can get ahead of them. I have a whole protocol. I have a shopping list in the book of the things that I want people to get. I got so good at treating people in my practice where in the average population, up to 2/3 of people were stopping these meds because of side effects, but nobody was stopping them in my practice. And I thought, well, what am I doing so differently? And it's because I put people on this regimen of about, I don't know, up like 10 to even like 13 supplements, everything from fiber, electrolytes, magnesium, probiotics, things like this. And I actually created a whole supplement line out of this because I felt like there was nothing out on the market for people. So if people are interested in kind of helping get ahead of their side effects, I have a product line called So Well. We have a GLP-1 support system, and we're getting in retail all over the country. I don't know if we're in Tennessee yet.
Hmm.
What do you guys have there? What's your grocery store there?
Kroger's.
Kroger's,
Oh,
the Publix,
oh,
and Kroger.
so later this year, you should see us there too, because people need additional products to help minimize what people are calling side effects, but it's really just byproducts of how these drugs are working. You're not drinking as much, you're not eating as much, so you're feeling a little dehydrated, you're a little volume depleted. It's hard to get in your fiber, so you need to supplement at the beginning. You don't have big appetites, so we want to make sure that you're supplementing with protein and things like that. So it's just knowing what is kind of ahead of you. Now, in very, very, very rare cases, there are some bigger things, side effects that will happen. Generally, they're related to a pre-existing disease. So we'll often hear about this term paralyzed stomach. It means gastroparesis. That's not a byproduct of this medication, but likely of already nerve damage that's happened through elevated blood sugars, and then something about being on this drug and the management just didn't mix. I've never seen it, but that's the one thing you kind of hear about out in the world.
Right. And there's people that shouldn't take it. And and you address that in the book, like
Mhm.
pancreatitis, different thing. Can you address some of the things that
Sure.
people who
So one of
shouldn't
those
take it?
other side effects that I want people to know about is gallstones. So when you lose a lot of weight, you can form gallstones, and some people have them already and ignore the pain of them or know that they're there. And sometimes that needs to be addressed before starting this medication. The medication doesn't cause gallstones, but it causes a lot of weight loss. So if you already have gallstones, they might grow. Or if you're having some pain, I want people to know what it is because we need to address it. Um, and if you have them, it's not a contraindication to going on the medication. We just need to kind of make sure they're watching out for any gallstone pain. Pancreatitis is generally caused by gallstone issues. So if a gallstone gets stuck in the biliary tree, it can cause inflammation that leads up to the pancreas. Again, it's not the medication that causes it. It's just a byproduct of how much weight you lose. If you have a history of unclear pancreatitis, we might have to be a little careful with you, but usually there's a reason for why it happened. And if we can identify the reason, then you can still use this med. The only people that we really do avoid this medication in for now is people with a family history of a very specific type of endocrine tumor called MEN type 2 endocrine tumor, or someone with a history of medullary thyroid cancer. We have not actually seen an increased risk of any cancer activity in humans, but there was a theoretical risk in animal models at much higher doses. And so for now, we're careful about that. But those cancers are incredibly rare. And so generally, the benefit of these medications far outweighs any small risk.
You also talk about in the book, because we do hear a lot about protein
Mhm.
and how you need to have a higher intake of protein. And in your book, you say you shouldn't wait more than 6 months to start strength training as well.
Mhm.
So, I think some people have the image of, I'm just going to take this drug and I don't have to do anything else. But there are lifestyle changes you have to consider as well.
Well, 100%. And that's why I wrote this book. It's not just the science of the drugs and obesity. It's like, what do you need to do to be successful? Because there's a misconception, and I think it's a lot of times from naysayers who are like, oh, you're taking the easy way out. It's a magic wand. It's not a magic wand. If you want to achieve health, you really have to do the work. So we move through 3 foundations in the book. We go through habit foundations, food foundations, which protein is king when you're on this medication, and then the mental thought foundations. And all of those you need to work on so that you can do the important work, like get to the gym and strength train. And that is often the biggest hurdle that people are like, but I'm not someone who likes to work out. And I'm like, you don't have to like it, but this is now a gift that you've been given with this medication, and you have to stay strong, and you're going to look at it as something you need to do for your health. And if you're taking this drug for your health, you're also going to work out for your health. And what I think many people have not enjoyed about working out is that they were on a treadmill for 60 minutes in a class, sweating, 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 never seeing results. And they're like, this is just not for me. And I want people instead to be focused on muscle fatigue. So whether that's heavy weights or just repetition so that we are building muscle, it's really, really important because these drugs, they cause you to lose a lot of weight. And although there are some drugs in development that may target fat loss alone or more so than muscle, generally when you lose weight, both fat and muscle. And we need to do our best to both eat for muscle building and loss of prevention of loss, and then also build up those muscles with strength training. Otherwise, you end up in a really tricky situation, especially as we age, where you end up dealing with something called sarcopenic obesity. And that is where you might be thinner on the scale, but all of a sudden we just have a lot more fat mass, and that doesn't help us live a better life.
And the thing about these drugs is another great thing about them is the long lasting effects of the drug.
Mm-hmm.
That the people are, I'm a yo-yoer. I am one of those people that my first diet, I was 15. I joined Weight Watchers when I was 15, and it's a here and there and here and there. And it's kind of been that way since I was 15. And this is something that lasts. But you have to take it forever. So can you address that?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think a lot of people think, do I take it for a year and then I'm off?
So that's the tricky part, especially when it comes to cost. And it's something that I think a lot of people aren't aware of when they start this drug. And I care so much about stopping yo-yo dieting that I literally put it in the subtitle of this book, that this drug is a way to end yo-yo dieting forever.
Mm-hmm.
Because yo-yo dieting makes it harder to lose. It makes it harder to lose weight every single time, and it causes stress in the body. And this medication, once you lose the weight, although it might have a maximum weight loss and you might want to lose more, but this drug allows you to get to a place of metabolic health, you will need to continue on the drug to continue the benefits. Maybe about 5, and if you can really push it in some trials, 10% of people will be able to come off. They tend to be a very specific demographic. Maybe one, they put on their weight very quickly and for a specific reason. Another medication they were on, something dramatic happened in their life, or it had to do with like treatment or pregnancy. And those same people are really able to focus on strength training and food. But I'll caveat that because not everyone who focuses on strength training and food and is perfect can come off these meds. So that's not a failure of you. That's just a byproduct of the fact that this synthetic hormone is curing something that was deficient and dysregulated. And just like we would need to treat your hormone, hypothyroidism, with a hormone, I think I missaid that, but just like we would need to treat your thyroid with a medication, we might need to treat obesity with a hormone medication indefinitely too, to continue to see the effect.
You talk about in the book that some people 5 months to a year feel less of they start hearing that food noise again, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to gain the weight back. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought this up. And thank you for really reading the book. That's like a little bit of a very detail.
Mhm.
So people really panic when this medication stops having the dramatic effect. And I see this on social media all the time. And my patients come to me, even though I warn them about it, people forget because your brain sometimes is your own worst enemy in this process. But the dramatic effect that the medication has will start to quiet at about 5 to 12 months of any given dose. This is very clearly elucidated in research and then what I've seen in clinical practice. And people panic because they say, I've become immune to this medication and it's not working anymore. But I'll ask the same patient that tells me that, I'll say, have you gained weight? And they'll say, no. Do you feel like you're out of control? No. Well, why do you think that it's not working? Well, I just now have hunger. Having hunger is normal, and eventually most people will return to having a more normalized sense of hunger, but you need to be aware of it. And that's also why some of the habits are very important. In the research, all hunger and cravings and affinity for different foods, it will return. But what stays is your ability to control what you eat and your weight maintenance. And so people just need to know not to panic, because what happens is, because we're so primed to have failed so many diets before, you'll say, I knew this was too good to be true. And then they might stop taking their medication or just cancel their next appointment. And they'll get way ahead of themselves. And so it's really important to know that this will happen and it's normal and it's good. Hunger is good. The pleasure of eating is good. We just need to make sure that we continue to stay connected to it.
I have a question too about, you address compounding. And I know a lot of online, because I follow an online app, and they are coming out. I have not done this, but they have come out with a compounded form. And I'm really kind of suspicious of this, so I have not partaken of this. Can you address the issue with compounding?
Yeah.
Since the FDA approved.
Yeah, it's really tricky. And I know why people are turning toward compounding. It's because of cost. I will say, though, that compounding is not affordable. I mean, it's not by any means as affordable as the FDA approved version in Europe. So we have some problems over here. And one way we could kind of solve this is if pharma would just bring down costs. And I truly believe, and if our government would kind of set mandates. Okay, but they haven't yet. So what do we do about that? So compounding, I really have always used compounding pharmacies as a doctor because I think that they provide a super unique service. Compounding of these drugs is much trickier than traditional compounding pharmacies. These peptides are complicated and they're under patent. So whatever you're getting at a compound is not the real drug. And it's very hard to make these medications. And I have just seen too many patients who come to my practice having been on compounding medications who, one, didn't see efficacy, two, had some very weird side effects. And then we put them on the real medication and then it's smooth sailing and then they see success. So I am concerned about what a lot of these medications are. I think even bigger than that, a lot of the places that are giving compounding pharmacies, I do not think it's holistic medical care. You should, and I write in the book so you can advocate for yourself, like what labs you should be getting. We should not just be starting this without knowing what our baseline is, so that we need to know to see the improvement. We need to know what got you here in the first place. I just spent 30, 40 minutes talking about how it's not your fault, but also like, we need to know if you have underlying insulin resistance. We need to know if you have sleep apnea or binge eating disorder. We need to know if you're using this for wrong reasons. And I think I'm starting to see that all over social media, people who never ever should have been able to get access to these medications, and the system failed them because they were trying to treat an eating disorder, a significant severe eating disorder, with this medication, and the system failed them by prescribing the medication, right? And so working with someone who really understands these medications and is looking at all of you and not just you as a number of a BMI, is really important. So compounding is tricky. And I think if you're not seeing the results you want or getting support you want, then look outward. Finding an obesity medicine specialist will often help you figure out how to use the real medications at a much lower cost. I can't tell you the amount of people who come to me whose other doctors or other compounding pharmacies, they don't touch insurance or prior authorization. So for years they're paying out of pocket. It actually turns out they had coverage and no one did the prior authorization. Compounding pharmacies don't want to work with your insurance, and insurance won't cover them. So you may actually have coverage. So it's tricky. It's tricky, and I understand it, but I also just be careful. Be careful and treat yourself holistically as your body deserves.
Do telehealth companies, are they able to get prescriptions to people for the GLP-1s versus the compound?
I think it depends. Most large telehealth companies, like ones that just ran an ad on the Super Bowl,
Just
they
saying.
are they are it's funny, they're vilifying pharma, but then they are their own pharma. I don't understand it. They aren't using the FDA approved, and they're not.
Okay.
It's a lot of work to get prior authorizations, and so be kind to your primary care doctors too, because it's a lot of back administrative work and time. But try to advocate for yourself if you know you have coverage, and you can kind of like help with some of the paperwork and go in and make an appointment, and be nice.
What do you go
I'm
ahead? I'm
sorry.
sorry. No. You go ahead.
You address that in the book too.
I
You
do.
address, yes. I mean, it's so thorough, and the list in there that
Right.
you
And the
can
recipes are great at the
just
end.
the go bag, you're
Yeah, right.
taking to have ready in it. But I really do like to how you addressed that if you're doing this for just to be skinny, that's not the thing. I think you had, was it three things that you need to say, and
Yeah.
only one of them can be about your
Yeah.
appearance.
I
Yeah.
mean, that's the most important thing. Actually, it's the thing I start off with in the book is, why are you doing this? And I ask everyone to identify their whys. And yeah, you come up with three things, but only one of them is allowed to be rooted in something vanity or appearance related. And if you can't think beyond that, this isn't right for you, because you're not going to be motivated. Skinny is not motivating. And you're not going to be happy, because being skinny doesn't fix anything.
Right.
So unless it's health related, that's motivating. Like seeing your hemoglobin A1C blood sugar numbers come down, being able to get off the floor because your joints don't hurt as much, being able to play with your grandkids, that's motivating. Thin isn't.
So, and I think that is something that women of our demographic understand much more clearly than women in their 20s and 30s, that skinny doesn't mean health. So it's not the
Totally.
same thing. What do you see in the future? I guess my last question is,
Mhm.
where do you see this going in the next 5 years as far as weight loss and management?
One, I see costs coming down. They have to, they must. It's important for us as a country. I do think we're going to see exciting, expanded FDA approved reasons for going on the medication, like potentially dementia prevention. And then I think we may see alternate dosings. I talk out a lot about how I don't like this term microdosing, because the clinical trials for the FDA approved reasons right now have been set, because we've studied the dosages and this is what works. But we may start seeing smaller dosages, and we're going to see different versions of the drug come out, maybe a pill, and like we'll start to get a little bit more specific on who needs which one. And I think we'll get a little even deeper into the genetics. So I think it's a very exciting time. I will also say what needs to happen in the next 10 years is that we need to continue to push forward on preventing obesity in the first place as a country. I love these medications because they treat the disease that's in front of us right now, but I hope for my children and my grandchildren that we can fix our food supply and we can fix the quality of our air and the amount of microplastics that are everywhere around us. I just don't think that can treat obesity currently, and we need to do both at once.
Right. If someone wanted to get in touch with you, you have So Well Health.
I
With
do.
So Well Health, can people, I know Colleen addressed the question about telehealth, but can people that don't live near you, can they contact you
Yes.
that way?
So Sowa Health is a company that helps people wherever they are on their GLP-1 journey. So we have our products that I talked about. We have a lot of information. I have the book now for anyone who's contemplating it or just needs support without me. And then yes, we do have a telehealth arm. It's pretty small because it is just me providing care, and I'm in 13 states. And I actually am about to run a new opening to the practice in March. People come and work with me in they have to come in and work with me through like a group at first. It's a course, not really a group. It's like a course. It's the So Well method that I write about in the book. I teach live, and then you get to work with me one-on-one. So we're doing that in March, and you can find me on our website, getsowell.com, or on social media. I'm at Alexandra Sowa, MD, and I try really hard to answer questions in DMs.
You're one person. Give yourself a
I
little
know,
grace
but
on that
but
one.
guys, the book is very thorough and it's a fast read. I'm not saying it's not like this thick thing,
No, no,
so I don't
it's
want to scare people like that. But it is a great resource.
if
It
you
really
have
Thank
is.
any
you.
questions about GLP-1, this is a great book. It's a great resource, The Ozempic Revolution. Thank you, Dr. Sowa. We appreciate you coming on today.
Thank you.